Pareto principle is called the 80-20 rule. And what I want to do is I want to dissect one principle, just one of these principles, right? Because I've already named off like 7-10 principles. But I want to dissect one of these principles and actually help you understand how I support CEOs and other members of the C-suite, executives, small business owners, mid-cap leaders, how I support them in being more effective using principle. The first piece, when it comes to this principle, is that this principle is called the principle of least effort. And so right now, if I don't care who you are, if you're a leader, if you're an executive, if you're a CEO, if you're a manager, or even if you just started a job, if someone says to you, the principle of least effort, like, is that interesting? Right? I mean, I find that interesting. This principle was discovered in 1896 by Vilfredo Pareto, who was an Italian economist. And this principle basically states that 80% of the results in our work comes from about 20% of our effort. Let me say this again to really help you wrap your mind. And I'm sharing this, by the way, just in case in this conversation around principles, you're like, prove it to me. Okay, here we go. All right. And if you're a leader, you want to hear this. Like, this is something that if you just dedicate the time that it takes me to explain it, to listening, this is going to dramatically transform how productive and powerful you can be in your leadership moving forward. So 80% of the results of our work come from 20% of our effort. Let me break this down. What this is basically saying is that when it comes to 60 minutes, like 60 minutes of your time, right? When you take 20% of 60 minutes, you get 12 minutes. All right? What it's basically saying is that in any given hour, not every hour, but I want you to follow, right? On average, about 12 minutes of that hour account for 80% of what you accomplished that hour. If we were to break it down into time frames like that, right? Let me say it again. 80% of your results, of the results in your work come from 20% of your effort. So if we break this down into an hour and you're working for 60 minutes, what this is basically saying is that 80% of the outcome from that hour comes from 12 minutes of that work. Now, I want you to look at your work life as it stands right now and how most of us spend an hour. And I can guarantee you that you're probably already shaking your head like, oh boy, you got a point, because I spent the first 10 minutes, going through social media. Then I was looking at some emails, and then when I saw the meeting coming, a quarter till the top of the hour, and I got to be in the meeting, that's when I put the agenda together. That's when I actually got the outcome from the hour. So 80% of the results in our work comes from 20% of our effort. Another way to think about this is 80% of outcomes come from 20% of inputs. So 80% of outputs, come from 20% of inputs. So then another way to think about this is, then what are my inputs? Am I being because if 80% of outputs come from 20% of inputs, what 20% is having the impact on how I think about my life? That's another way to think about that. So then what about the executive? Or what about the mother? Or what about the business person who is always busy? Busy, I mean, something happening all the time. Like there's not enough time in a day for you. And here I am saying that 20% of your time accounts for 80% of your results. And you may not believe it yet. I'm going to prove it in a minute with science. Okay? And you're busy. I talk about this in my book, Slay Your Goals. And one of the things I talk about is, there's a quote in the book that basically says something like, A rocking chair is always in motion, but it's not making progress. And I'm afraid that a lot of us are always in motion, but we're not making progress because we don't understand principles like this. Let me tell you how powerful this principle is. Right now, my company is working with, it's one of the largest food retailers in North America, and they're expanding. Europe, they already got stores and restaurants in Canada, and we created a 6-month coaching program for like 50 of their top leaders. One of the things we did in this bespoke program is we said, okay, section 1, leading yourself. Section 2, leading others. And then section 3, leading the business. And so we broke it down in that way, 2 months in every area. And then for leading the business, what I did when I wrote the curriculum and the facilitative coaching portion for the coaches that worked for me, I was like, we're going to teach them the 80-20 principle, because it's a principle that I know always works. And if I can get, let's say, if I can get, right, 80% of the 50 of these leaders enrolled in this principle, then they're going to see results. They're going to be like, man, that company, do you see these leaders? They're going to get results, right? And I know that 20% are probably going to fall out because of the 80-20 rule. All right. But if I can get 80% of these leaders to take on this principle, now we get the phone calls back. Hey, man, that was amazing. Let's cue this up for 2026. Why am I so confident? Here's the research. The 80-20 principle shows up everywhere in your life. For instance, if you have carpet in your home, 20% of the carpet in your home gets 80% of the wear. If you got wood floors, same difference. 20% of those wood floors in your home are getting 80% of the traffic. And so you probably see, like, man, I can see where, if you have guests, where everybody walked last night. And it's like, and then over here it's fairly clean, but over here it's really dirty right here. Because 20% of your guests were walking, if you follow, right? They were walking in most of your guests were walking in this area because 20% of the carpet in your home gets 80% of the wear. Same thing with clothing. 20% of the clothes in your closet gets worn 80% of the time. I mean, 80, and that's true for me. It's true for most of us, right? Why are you still shopping there? You're not going to wear that. That's going to be in the other 80% that never comes off the hanger, never comes just sitting there. Something else that's proven by most DMVs is 80% of accidents between motorists are caused by 20% of drivers. So 20% of the drivers can't drive. Because of that, they cause 80% of the accidents. All right. There's more research here. If you're going to a gas pump to fill up your vehicle, did you know that, let's say you put $100, you got a truck, you put $100 of gas, right? And let's just say, the gas is, $10 a gallon. That's not, but I'm just doing this for easy math, right? That means 20 of those dollars will actually be spent on gas that propels the truck forward. The other 80% is just going to burn off and go in the air. Most folks don't know that when basically when you pumping your gas, 80% of that's just going to be getting burnt off. It's not. And the research is that in a combustion engine, 80% of the energy is wasted and only 20% of that energy gets to the wheels and accounts for 100% of your motion. The rest of it just burns off as exhaust. So this concept of 80-20 is true almost everywhere you look. Let's stick with the research. Let's go to the next piece of research here, just in case somebody's still not convinced, right? Studies continue to show that 20% of customers typically yield about 80% of your profit. If you're a business owner, this is what you should be watching. I'm giving y'all game at the same time. I hope you're realizing this, right? Why do you think that when you're at the airport, they let all of us who are executive platinum and platinum on the plane first, and they don't care what you think? Why do you think they do that? Is it bad business? Or do they know that 20% of customers we let get on the plane drive 80% of our profit because they're business travelers. And so we're going to treat them different in front of you. We're going to treat them different in front of you because we understand this principle of business. And it really doesn't matter if you're upset about it because you only account for 20% of our profit anyway. You ain't coming back. You only fly once a year. Why am I trying to please you? But Mr. Harris, sir, good morning. And like when I get on the plane, they say, Mr. Harris, good morning. And then the next person, they might not even say it to. And I'm like, man, how did it? But they're looking at that ticket. And they're going, executive platinum, whatever. Oh, Mr. Harris, good morning. How are you? Oh, good morning. How are you? And they're like, boop, to the next person. Just boop. Right. And it's like, man, you say nothing to him. But they've been trained to do that. They've been trained to do that, right? Pay attention to these folks. Studies continue to show that 20% of customers typically yield about 80% of your profit. Business owners. And by the way, as a business owner, I'm always watching that. Why? Because I have clients that drive, and by the way, this is always, I always have clients that drive the majority of my income. And so I'm thinking about, okay, if this client drives the majority of my income, then I need to be finding the next client that's going to drive the majority of my income. So when this client decides, oh, you know what, this has been great, but we're going to wrap up this program, I'm not like, what's going to happen? Right? Business owners, like that should always be your play. When it's sweet, you need to be performing in your business development as if it's not. That's when you go hard in business development, when it's sweet. Once you begin to realize that a small portion of what influences you will account for a large amount of your results, you begin to be more thoughtful about what influences you. Right? Because most of us want to be high performers. But we want to be high performers, but we don't understand the principles of high performance. And so that's why we're spinning our wheels. Like, this is game right here, right? Because here's the thing. Principles support you in how you live your life, but they also support you in how you run a business. They also support you with getting wealthy. Like all these things. So all the things we want can be found in principle, which is why I believe principle is so powerful and will always outweigh preferences. So a small portion of what influences me will drive a large amount of my results. And so what this is saying is that you can achieve the results you want in your life by identifying the most powerful causes, which allow you to achieve more with much less. Pareto's principle is why vision and strategy matters so much for leaders. If you're a Slayer Goals member and you're like, man, why is he always talking about what's your vision? Why is he always talking about ensuring I have strategy time for my action plans? That I'm reading my goals daily, but then at least once a week, I'm looking at those goals and I'm aligning them with the strategy for the week. Why is he saying that? The reason I'm saying that is because when we understand Pareto's principle, if I can support you in thinking about the 20% of actions that will actually create 80% of the outcomes you want in life, now I'm focused in the right areas. And if I'm focused in the right areas, I'm seeing outcomes, the outcomes I want. And then I just keep recycling that. And before you know it, my life is unrecognizable. A year later, 2 years later, all of a sudden, people are like, you driving like that? You living like that? Man, you dressing like that? What did you do differently? Oh, I just followed one of God's laws. Because that's what all principles are. Y'all follow? Thank you for watching Inspirational Perspective. If you love this show and you want to see more content like this, you can go right here. And if you like this subject and you want to see much more content that we have available for you, just click the button here. As always, thanks for watching. Be sure to watch the show live, 7 a.m. every Sunday morning on WBON Radio, or you can catch it right here on YouTube or Facebook.com/Coach Linnell Harris. Be sure to hit that like button. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe so we can get more content just like this to you.